meaningful place in life in the European Union at the present time. Where you have a situation of 30 to 60% youth unemployment, there is the real danger of the lost generation. There is the real danger that people see their lives as being worthless, being purposeless, and therefore people become, and their idealism becomes poisoned very easily. And that is a real issue and a real challenge for us. And I suppose the 6 billion youth guarantee is a start in the right direction. As MEP Martin has said, of course, it's not nearly enough. It's not nearly enough. If it's front-loaded, if it's found to be successful, provides good job activation, long-term deals with long-term unemployed, etc., then I have no doubt we can be addressed again and brought forward. Can I say just one thing in conclusion, and that is that I agree entirely with the point that was made by Rachel, and that is the question put by Pascal, the EU disability card. I think even if we were to take that as one single specific item to come out of this meeting and to see how that can be introduced right across the European Union so that disabled people can have equal access in terms of transport, in terms of their access to all countries in the European Union, that would be a major achievement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Well, that concludes this morning's debate, so I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Rachel, Nevin, Marietta and Minister Joe Costello. Thank you very much. Now we're going to have a short coffee break outside and we're going to resume here at 10:50. So thank you, and we're now adjourned. We'll start off in 2 minutes, so can you take your seats, please? Thank you. Are we to time?
Grant, we're due to finish at Jesus.
We'll try to get through them all. Ladies and gentlemen, we will resume in 1 minute, so can you take your seats, please? Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume now. So if you would take your seats there at the back, and if you could finish up any of those conversations that you're having. That's great. Our next point on today's agenda is a discussion on enlargement and neighbourhood policy. And I'm delighted to welcome Ambassador Valentin Inčko, who's the High Representative for Bosnia-Herzegovina, to share his insights into the membership aspirations of Bosnia and also other countries in the Balkans. Our second speaker is Mr. Erwin Fure from the Centre for European Policy Studies and the former EU Special Representative in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And more recently, Erwin was the OSCE Special Representative for the Transnistrian settlement process. European Parliament's Vice President, Mr. Martinez, will be the first responder from the floor after the two speakers conclude. So, Ambassador Inčko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the organizers of this conference very, very cordially for driving up an extremely well-planned agenda and bringing together participants whose various roles make it possible to have an informed and productive exchange of ideas. I think this reflects the character of the Irish presidency, which has been very businesslike and has at the same time fostered the sort of creative debate that can help resolve long-standing problems. I'm a long-standing admirer of Ireland, not least because Ireland is a superpower in peacekeeping. You have so far sent over 100,000 soldiers to various places around the globe, including my home country, also Austria, also over 100,000, and I think there is a long-standing commitment and profile of your country in this region. You in the northwest of Europe, you care also about southeast of Europe, which is far away, both at the end of Europe, but there's always a commitment of Ireland. You even sent U2 to Sarajevo, and Bono made a special composition for Sarajevo, Miss Sarajevo, yeah, because of the commitment of your people, and we really appreciate that you care. I would say that Bosnia-Herzegovina is a specific case. Also, my mandate is a specific one. It's defined by the Dayton Peace Agreement and supported by a series of UN Security Council resolutions. This mandate includes interpreting and overseeing the implementation of the peace agreement, which contains the country's constitution, as well as coordinating the work of the international community. In recent years, OHR has, however, stepped back. We have given a center stage to the European Union, and we have a very energetic a new EU Special Representative, Peter Sørensen, my friend, and we are trying to increase the Brussels presence and decrease the Dayton presence. And I would really like to say once more in public here that I appreciate Peter Sørensen's enormous commitment, skill, persistence, goodwill and energy which he is bringing into his job as European Union Special Representative. Of course, our mandates are different. I have a Dayton mandate and a UN mandate. He has a mandate of 27 countries. But I think there's a lot of complementarity and a lot of synergy. For the reasons that EU is there, we speak about EU enlargement and neighborhood policy, and I think we should also speak about, in this context, about Bosnia and Herzegovina. We must speak in terms of a tailored and targeted strategy for this country that circumvents and eliminates unique obstacles created by the country's recent history. We must also keep in mind that the country's EU path is a strategic objective endorsed by the European Union and repeatedly confirmed. Bosnia and Herzegovina's successful integration will yield also benefits not only for the country but also to the people of Europe. It is in fact an EU foreign policy success waiting to happen. However, in my view, Bosnia is a special case. Of course, everybody would say my country is a special case, but I think Bosnia is indeed a special case. So let me assess this quickly. Today, Bosnia and Herzegovina is equipped with a number of modern institutions. It has a stable currency, one of the most stable in the region. It has an overhauled code of civil and criminal code. It has now, what it didn't have after the war, a common flag, a common anthem. We still don't have the lyrics, but we have a common anthem. We have a border police, etc., etc. It is important to continue this path, but especially continue the Euro-Atlantic path. And it's important not to reopen old questions which have been solved in the past, like the question of territorial integrity or sovereignty of Bosnia-Herzegovina. The negative developments are the results, if we speak about them, the negative developments are a result of unwillingness or an inability of the part of the political establishment to change its mindset and its approach to politics. Their priority is power. Of course, this is priority of every politician, but it's only power, and there is no sense for compromise, for dialogue, or for tolerance, which was the founding philosophies of European Union. Is there an alternative to such politics? Yes, there is, and we don't have to look very far to find it. When High Representative Cathy Ashton secured the landmark Serbia-Kosovo agreement in April, the stakeholders had to overcome an extraordinary number of political obstacles, and they jettisoned an immense amount of historical baggage. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, the obstacles are not as great, and the baggage is not as heavy. Therefore, I'm asking you, which is easier, to solve the Kosovo-Serbia question, or, for example, the city council question in Mostar, which still doesn't have a city council for years? Or which is easier, to solve the Kosovo question, to ensure that constitutional adjustments are made, or whether the Sejdic-Finci issue in Bosnia-Herzegovina is a more difficult question. Yeah. Which means including minority members which are now excluded. So clearly, the immediate challenges facing BiH politicians are, relatively speaking, modest and easier to solve. The same goes for registering ownership of military property, the only task that still has to be completed before Bosnia and Herzegovina can get participating in NATO's membership action plan. The BiH challenges are easier to overcome, but BiH leaders have resolutely demonstrated that they do not want to overcome them. Failure has not happened by accident, it has happened by design. This is a country whose people want, and I like to repeat it, this is a country whose people want to join the European Union, but whose leaders are much more ambivalent, or they just pay lip services. And that is what it makes a special place. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the views of the people and the views of the leadership diverge, and there is a huge gap between people and the leadership. A successful enlargement policy has therefore to take this divergence into account. I think we also have to reconsider our approach in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And you know that Stefan Füle made some very good remarks in the European Parliament on the 22nd of May. He said also that we have to recalibrate our approach, and the Irish Minister of State for European Affairs, Lucinda Creighton, has also echoed this approach. The question is, however, how to recalibrate this approach. I think that we have to reconsider our policy of the recent 7 years, and we have to find new ways how to approach this issue in Bosnia-Herzegovina. One of them is the recent development when thousands of citizens have come out on the streets on Bosnia-Herzegovina to express their anger at the absence of competent, honest or effective government. The thousands who came out onto the streets 2 weeks ago and who may very well come out onto the streets again in the weeks to come, these people were predominantly young and forward-looking, the very people who have grasped and embraced the fundamental European values of transparency, accountability and inclusiveness. These wonderful people have left politicians flat-footed and speechless. I think in the year of the European citizen, we should consider especially a new approach and also join hands with these young people. We should factor it fully into our approach and bring to an end an approach that has allowed obstructionists to maintain the perception that they are part of the solution and partners of the international community. In this connection, I ask myself the question, can somebody who repeatedly advocates policies that go against Europe and European values, can he be a partner for the European Union? The EU's breakthrough in the Serbia-Kosovo dispute has rightly been attributed to the decisive political engagement of High Representative Ashton. In Bosnia and Herzegovina today, I also believe that success can be achieved only through a creative and stronger political engagement with clear conditions and benefits explicitly based on European values, the values that are fully understood by the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina, if yet not fully understood by the leaders. What is abundantly clear to me after 4 years in the job is that Bosnia and Herzegovina cannot integrate into the EU if mainstream politicians inside the country are seeking to drive it towards disintegration. This is a fundamental point on which we must take a stronger stand. You cannot integrate into Europe, but disintegrate at home. This is not acceptable. When rethinking our strategy, we should consider a number of tools for pushing change more forcefully, while still maintaining the central role of the institutions of the European Union in the country. This might include some or all of the following. I think we should link in future financial assistance policies more closely to political progress. It's not permissible that Stefan Füle comes on 11th of April, local leaders don't deliver, and 3 weeks later, local leaders get money from the IMF. Yeah? So we should coordinate better also these financial assistance policies. Then confronting more directly political parties and actors who block or undermine reforms and who promote division. We should also prevent a rollback of previous achieved actions by reaffirming the role of the OHR and EUFOR in maintaining the progress achieved in the post-Dayton period. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, in 5 days or 120 hours, the European Union will be enriched by a new member. Zagreb and Dubrovnik will be even more European. And I'm pleased that 2 former foreign ministers of Croatia are today here with us, Tonino Picula and Gordan Jandrokovic, who have both made a tremendous contribution to this enlargement. With Croatia's membership, Bosnia and Herzegovina will have 1,000 kilometers of direct European borders. And the EU is now knocking on the door of Bosnia and Herzegovina, literally. On the other side, Serbia is making tremendous and courageous progress towards EU candidacy. And Montenegro has closed already 2 chapters in the EU negotiating process. So the region is moving. And I think we have the best regional situation since 20 years. a unique chance for regional cooperation, but also for regional reconciliation. With this optimistic note, I would like to close, hoping also all the best for the wonderful people and citizens of Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Mr. Ferre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman, honourable members of Parliament. A great pleasure to be here with you this morning and to share the platform with my friend Ambassador Inzko. This conference coincides almost to the day with the 10th anniversary of the European Union Western Balkans Summit that took place in Thessaloniki in 2003, a summit which launched the process that we know as the Thessaloniki Agenda, a process which confirmed the EU perspective for the countries of the Balkan region. And the language adopted at that summit was very clear. The future of the Balkans lies in the European Union. And since then, we have definitely witnessed many major developments in the region which have consolidated the country's efforts towards lasting stability and in the process bringing them closer to the European Union. We have heard with great jubilation the final accession of Croatia to the European Union as the 28th member state, the stabilization association process, which will lock almost the entire region into the accession perspective. Also, the recent agreement between Serbia and Kosovo. These all reflect evidence of the success of the reform process launched at Thessaloniki. For me, what probably had the greatest impact was the decision to grant visa-free travel to the Schengen area for the citizens of the Balkan region. This was achieved very much thanks to the pressure from the European Parliament and from some other parliaments of the EU member states, which understood the great benefits that could accrue from such a decision. And the success of the exercise also demonstrated that the countries of the region do have the administrative capacity to deliver if they focus their minds on the job and are given clear and detailed conditions to fulfill in return for the granting of the agreed benefits. All of these developments and many more are a concrete demonstration of the effectiveness of the EU's so-called soft power and of the continued attraction of EU accession, despite the current adverse economic climate in the European Union. At the same time, there is no denying, however, the decrease in support within the European Union for continued enlargement. In a number of EU member states, governments hesitate to give the enlargement process more than lukewarm support for fear of alienating voters. The rise of some right-wing parties which equate further enlargement with increased levels of immigration has further complicated the debate. This, in my view, short-sighted approach could have serious implications for the countries of the Western Balkan region. A diminishing prospect of accession would dilute the EU's transformative power for much-needed reforms and would also fuel nationalist agendas in some of the countries where political stability remains fragile. Indeed, were it to adopt a pause in enlargement after the accession of Croatia, the European Union would lose much of its credibility. As the Irish Minister of State for European Affairs, Lucinda Creighton, stated at a conference marking the 10th anniversary of the Thessaloniki Agenda, which was hosted here in Dublin a month ago, and I quote, "The Union offers the prospect of membership to those countries in Europe that meet its conditions. By withdrawing the offer, the EU would lose one of its most effective tools for promoting peace, democracy and prosperity in Europe." She went on to emphasize that enlargement must remain an integral part of the Union's future because it has proved itself a powerful tool that has the capacity to transform the lives of the people of Europe, both within and beyond it. The award of the Nobel Peace Prize to the EU provided eloquent testimony to this truth." End of quote. So I do hope, I know that in Brussels the leaders and ministers are discussing the Western Balkans today. I do hope that the European Council will reaffirm the central role played by enlargement in the EU's foreign policy. This would be the best and most effective message to those countries aspiring to join the European Union, but who are suggesting at the same time, some of them, that reforms are not worth the effort. This is particularly relevant to those countries where reforms are lagging behind. Fundamental weaknesses such as the lack of a culture of political dialogue and consensus building, increased inter-ethnic tensions continue to undermine prospects for long-term stability. This is certainly the case in Albania, and as we just heard, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. In these same countries, and especially in the latter one, serious concerns remain over the absence of respect for independence of the media, as well as harassment of journalists, with practices that have been condemned by the OSCE representative for the freedom of the media, only last week by the UN representative for the media, as well as by every international media watchdog. Recent events in Turkey have also raised concern over the state of democracy in the country. As Commissioner Füle himself stated during his recent visit to Turkey earlier this month, democracy is a demanding discipline, not only during election campaigns, but every day. It requires debates, consultation, and compromise. It will be of critical importance, therefore, that every effort is made by the government there in engaging with all sectors of society to work together in a spirit of compromise so that the reform process and the accession negotiations can continue. So, honourable members, whether it is Turkey, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania, or the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, there can be no substitute for political dialogue and consensus building. My own country, Ireland, offers a unique example in this respect. When we were preparing to join the European Union exactly 40 years ago in 1973, all the political parties put their party interests aside and worked together in a spirit of a consensus in order to achieve the objective that we had set ourselves. And as the Foreign Minister from Croatia, Mrs. Vesna Pusic, stated at the Thessaloniki Anniversary Conference I mentioned earlier, what is vital is a working consensus rather than a mere declaratory consensus. This is the difference that can be made for success or failure. And of course, to achieve this, the role of parliaments, and in particular the European Affairs Committees, can be decisive in creating a climate conducive for consensus building. By promoting dialogue and consultations with civil society and with all sectors of society, it ensures greater acceptance by the public of much-needed reforms. Reaching out to civil society and the media in an inclusive manner should be seen as a sign of strength rather than of weakness. At the same time, there is no doubt that bilateral disputes between neighbouring countries within the Balkan region also impact negatively on the enlargement process, deflecting attention from the real reform deficiencies and consuming far too much energy which could be more usefully deployed elsewhere. In this respect, it is important for the European Union to realise that delays in allowing accession negotiations to start are holding the process hostage to bilateral complaints of some member states will only fuel nationalist agendas and make the reform process more difficult. It also diminishes the stabilisation and association process itself. These are all reminders of how heavily the legacy of the Balkans' turbulent history continues to weigh in the region, and how easy it is for positive trends to be reversed. Even with a framework for post-conflict reconciliation in place, it takes very little for the process to unravel. Just as in 2003, when it was emphasized that the EU perspective represents the glue that maintains stability in the Balkan region, The response from the EU today should be to strengthen and reconfirm its policy of enlargement. We hope, therefore, once again, that the Council will this week take bold decisions that will inject new momentum in the enlargement process. I was asked also to speak about the neighbourhood policy, but in the interest of time, I will restrict my remarks just to 2 points, and the text of my statement will be circulated in any case afterwards. First of all, it is to say, based on the reactions to the southern Mediterranean neighbourhood, it is very important for the European Union to enhance its capacity of analysis and longer-term strategic policy so that it can be more proactive rather than merely reactive to events. And secondly, as regards the Eastern neighbourhood countries, there, of course, all the eyes are on the preparations for the summit, which will take place in Vilnius, hosted by the Lithuanian presidency in November, where, again, hopefully there will be important decisions relating to strengthening the relations between the European Union and the countries of the Eastern neighbourhood, in particular Ukraine, Moldova and others. A final point, Mr. Chairman, is the reference that I would like to again reiterate to the role of civil society. There is no doubt that support for civil society and media in strengthening the democratic process and guarding against any erosion of democratic values and standards by governments must remain at the core of the EU's policies, whether it is in the Eastern neighbourhood, in the general neighbourhood of the EU, or in the Balkan region. This is particularly important in countries in transition or in post-conflict societies, and we have many examples of post-conflict peace processes where a successful implementation has been dependent on the involvement of civil society at the grassroots level at the earliest possible stage. The Northern Ireland peace process offers us an eloquent illustration of the successful role which continues to be played by civil society organisations in reaching across the ethnic or political divide and creating a critical space for dialogue. We heard last night the President talk about this critical space for dialogue. This dialogue helps to overcome long-standing prejudices and establishes a relationship of trust between the different communities, reflecting the spirit of the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, which brought peace to these islands. And it is for this reason that during the Irish chairmanship of the OSCE last year, and as part of our role as mediator in the transition settlement process, we brought representatives from civil society from both Chisinau and Tiraspol to Dublin and Belfast so that they could explore for themselves the different facets of the Northern Ireland peace process. And during their visit, they listened to personal testimonials from former prisoners, from the Loyalist tradition, from the Republican tradition, now working together at the community level in a spirit of reconciliation. They also learned of the Peace Building and Conflict Resolution Centre currently being established in Northern Ireland with EU funds, which will provide a permanent platform for exchange of expertise and reconciliation between post-conflict societies across Europe and beyond. And as the Deputy Prime Minister said to all the OSCE participating states last year, it is the responsibility of we who have known peace to share our experience with others. So whether it is South Africa in 1994, Northern Ireland in 1998, the Ohrid Framework Agreement in 2001, or Kosovo and Serbia today and tomorrow, the responsibility and the message is the same: courageous leadership and trust. And without, sorry, my last page here. With leadership and courage, the impossible can be made possible, and a relationship of trust created across the political and ethnic divide. This is the challenge facing the Balkan and wider region as we approach the 100th anniversary of the dramatic events of Sarajevo, an event which no doubt will bring much soul-searching and endless debate as to whether we have learned the lessons from the past. Courageous leadership and stretching a hand of friendship to one's political opponents in a true spirit of reconciliation will ensure that we can shape that debate in a positive manner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Furey. Now, before we have questions, I'm going to ask for a 5-minute contribution from Mr. Martinez from the European Parliament from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. One of my responsibilities as Vice President in the European Parliament, apart from relations with national parliaments, is relations with candidate countries and pre-candidate countries. I can bear witness to the enormous interest in populations in our neighbouring countries hungering for liberty and dignity and seeking to be part of our fellowship in the European Union. I think this is a story of success, moving from 6 to 28 countries, with many still on the waiting list. I think this is obviously a success story, and the Nobel Prize also is testimony of this. Countries who had been at war with one another for centuries have now moved towards stability and unprecedented success. And I think, friends and colleagues, this is a success of politics and politicians at a time when politicians are particularly discredited because of interests counter to democracy in our countries. I think certain values which have been upheld and are set out in the Copenhagen criteria and perhaps should include solidarity. Now, these are clearly included in the roadmap for the candidate countries. Now, the pro-Europeans in the Parliament, luckily we're still in the majority, consider that it's a right of countries who appear on the map of Europe. It's not some sort of grace that we're granting. As a Spaniard, I have benefited from this right, and I have fought for it for a long time. And we also consider that it's not just a right, it's an aspiration which goes hand in hand with the European project. The idea that there shouldn't be holes or gaps in the map of Europe. I think that should be a motivation for all of us. That every time a new country joins us, Croatia is joining us almost as we speak. I think it's beneficial for all of us, not just for the countries that join, it also benefits all of us. I think that's the story we've seen of enlargement over the years. And when we assess the negotiations, we shouldn't just look at what is politically expedient. Otherwise, we'd have never had any enlargement. People have often said, you know, it's not, the time isn't right, the time isn't right. And I don't think it's a question of the time being right or what is, happens to fit the political agenda. So I think that obviously we promote enlargement, but we also have to ratify the applications before the governments sign and the national parliaments ratify each enlargement application. And I think this is a very important role because new criteria continue to appear. For example, the fight against corruption or organized crime, but also making very careful that we don't exercise double standards where we expect more of the applicants than we expect of ourselves. There have been major demonstrations in our countries with not a word of condemnation, whereas people get very upset about similar demonstrations, for example, which might take place in some of the candidate countries. And so I think that obviously we're very pleased to welcome Croatia. We're very worried about the situation in Turkey, and we can't go on negotiating forever. Fortunately, the surreal situation with Iceland has come to an end. We kept on opening and closing chapters. We were discussing that, and we knew the people who we were talking to were actually opposed to their country joining the European Union.